G'day everyone, I'm the man called Kemosabe, the man with the plan from the land down under, and this is my review of Mom, Mother of Madness. Before I get started, I want to remind you guys that the company man, Dead, White and Blue, is currently in demand. It's 100% funded, 100% art complete, and shipping from within the US. Its Suicide Squad crossed with Black Hawk Down, a group of CIA-run superhumans are framed for a terrorist attack and have to clear their names, stop war from breaking out, and pull together as a team to escape a violent Middle Eastern war zone. It's high-octane action, bad guys doing bad things for a good reason. If you like paramilitary action, spycraft, anti-heroes, and sophisticated geopolitical storytelling, this book is for you. There's a link in the description below, go check it out. Now I was going to try and review this comic straight. I was going to try and avoid the political stuff, the culture war stuff, and just focus on the story and the art itself. The goal being to show that, no, not everybody can write, no, celebrities don't have any great insight into what makes an entertaining story, and that comics are a unique medium that require study, attention, and commitment. You can't just come along with your failed movie script pitch and jam it into a 48-page graphic novel. You've got to know comics to make comics. That was the intent. But holy shit, this book is so bad I couldn't avoid all those former elements. So I'm just going to break this thing apart page by page. Normally I read a book front to back, sometimes more than once before I review it. But I was 3 pages in before I knew I had to do this live. I had to capture my thoughts as I went. First of all, the cover is awful. It's poorly conceived, it's clumsy, but worst of all, it's ugly. You can do a gimmicky cover. Some kind of high-concept artsy cover. You can even get away with those minimalist covers that don't show what happens in the book, but I wouldn't recommend it. What you shouldn't do is have a straight-up ugly cover. A cover that offends the eye. No one wants to look at ugly things. What good is a cover that nobody wants to look at? This cover looks like a tortured high school student's final work in the junior year. It's full of satanic one-eyed secret society imagery with a cluttered logo, an ugly colour scheme, and a tacky airbrush late 70s, early 80s poster art feel. If that were the vibe of the comic, it could maybe be forgiven. But the comic is set 20 years in the future, and nothing on the cover really links to what's inside, conceptually or stylistically. The book starts off badly, not just in concept, but in terms of actual story writing. It does all the stuff you're told not to do. The first page is 2 panels, 9 word balloons, jam-packed with self-aggrandizing ramble. The next few pages aren't any better. I didn't want to talk idpol, but the book is replete with it. There really is no avoiding it. After years of being preached to about identity politics, more of the same makes it impossible to engage meaningfully with this story. We meet Maya at a party at an art museum where she rambles on for pages about who she is, but it's, how can I say it, it's a young person's version of who they are, a far leftist's version of who they are, a Steve Buscemi, hello fellow kids version of who you are. Real people don't talk like this. There's some allowance for idealised speech and talk in comics, especially older works and within the limited space the medium provides, but this ramble is insipid and surface level. If that's the point, if Khaleesi is trying to make Maya an unlikable self-righteous prig, hey, mission accomplished. She tells us she likes Ruth Bader Ginsburg speeches, she likes Martha Stewart living, she plays Undertale, she watches children's cartoons, and ostensibly she's telling us, the reader, these things. She's breaking the fourth wall, so self-aware that she watches too many children's cartoons, aware that she needs to listen to more podcasts. She even ends her ramble with a "thank you very much." It's cliché, it's worse than we feared. Surely they aren't playing this character in this dialogue straight. Surely there's a gotcha coming along, right? She complains about being a token in her boss's female empowerment initiative, because that's what comics are all about. I guess this isn't made for me. She says being at his party is her own personal hell. Well, reading this book must be mine. The double-page spread that follows hits every outdated, tropey, clumsy hack, men-bad rant in one fell swoop. It's almost impressive in its conformity. You have the pan-ring boss spouting #MeToo and times up buzzwords mid-speech, while still referring to women as gals, and Foe begging them not to bring any lawsuits against him. Ha ha ha. Men ogling the paintings of nude women in the gallery, comparing them to the modern women. They sure don't make them like that anymore, they say. Another guy getting accused of spouting binary, gender essentialist, transphobic bilge rot. What is this woman, a non-binary privateer? I can't see bilge rot making a big comeback in the next 20 years as an insult. The dialogue is unnatural, forced, a strange mix of now and the 1750s. It's not consistent. Men grope the women openly and tell them they should take it as a compliment. Women false laugh at the men's jokes to keep them happy. It's a scene from Mad Men transported 20 years into our future. So do things get worse for women in the future? Do they regress? Do the women somehow lose rights and privileges, despite every major corporation, tech giant and media outlet championing their rights 24/7 in modern times? How do those evil men manage to reassert the patriarchy after their lord and saviour Harvey Weinstein got sent to jail? Truly it was a dark day for all misogynists. Maya is then punked out by the paintings. The girl with the pearl earring tells her she'll never live up to her waifish pale teen beauty. Is anyone expecting her to live up to it aside from herself? Isn't the point of the girl with the pearl earring that she was a 1 in a million unattainable beauty that time and life would erode, even the very day after the painting was finished? The day you're born, you start dying. The beauty of the girl with the pearl earring is unattainable, even for her, because beauty and youth are fleeting. The fact Maya feels she has to live up to this unattainable standard so much that she hallucinates about the painting taunting her over this shortcoming says more about the character than about men. Another painting claims the artist had to give her more vertebrae to make her fit some preconceived notion of femininity. The next claims her pose is impossible to pull off. This is classic where are the organs type crap. It's clumsy, it's ham-fisted, but it's nothing compared to what comes next. In the middle of the party, while wearing a white skirt, in a first world country where hygiene products are plentiful, but not free, you see, this is the point. Women still have to pay for tampons and pads. Maya either gets her period or somehow, despite more than a decade of experience dealing with them, she underestimates how much protection she needs and a stain bleeds through her clothes. Everyone at the party is outraged. We catch bits of conversation. Someone says they would kill themselves if that happened to them. Cool overreaction, sis. It's disgusting, etc., etc. The best one is one dude saying that women should be on top of things like this and things like taking care of and raising families. Another guy says she probably can't even organise to pick up her own kid from school. Now, that's a hell of a leap. Oh wow, that woman had a bathroom accident. That's unpleasant. I bet she's a failure at life, neglects her kids and can't even breathe without a reminder. What a stupid bitch, she should just kill herself. Far be it from me to deny someone's experience. But I doubt Khaleesi, whose real name I don't actually remember, and I'm not going to go look it up. Khaleesi, I doubt you experience these things. This sounds like the sort of stuff you might have heard of from others, or exaggerations of actual events, or what you imagine does happen. Just not to you, because you're a world-famous millionaire in Hollywood. If you didn't know what you're getting into with Hollywood, I bet you do now, and if you choose to stay, that's on you. Maya storms off amidst the whispers and murmurings, using her mutant armpit hair to unhook the velvet cord and gain access to an unpopulated part of the museum as one of the Morlocks looks on. Then she pulls a full Kamala Khan's Stretch Armstrong moment, declaring herself to be a beauty who is a beast, and a beast who is beautiful. Is she telling us? No, don't do that. I'm not here. I'm not part of the story. I want to escape into a story. Don't bring me into your mess. Then we get a flashback. It's a little early on for that. I'm still of the opinion that most flashbacks can be substituted for a few lines that hint at what happened before now. Look at Punisher when Garth Ennis retconned that whole stupid Angel Frank with magic guns arc. Frank says, heaven wanted me to kill for them, it didn't work out, so now I'm back. That's it. You don't need more than that. Maya was adopted by a lovely interracial couple, of course. The female presenting one of the pair, because I'd hate to misgender anyone, had some sort of condition that required daily injections. On the news, there is a report that large-scale cattle ranches have done irreparable damage to the countryside. That's going to matter later on. Eat the bugs, live in the pod, bigot. It's the price you have to pay for being white or male or straight, or any or all of the above. Don't you know that all the ills of Western society are your fault? Your individual fault? While you were spreading scalding hot asphalt across the road so people could get to work, and Bill Gates was working on global depopulation programs, it was you that was the problem. Fuck off, Khaleesi. I'll eat a burger if I want to. As Flashback Maya grows and ages, she tells us about the good times and the bad times. At least Khaleesi bothered to hint at bad times to try and balance things out. The dad keeps banging on about how everyone is put on this earth to help one another, so I imagine that'll be her "Why do we fall, Master Bruce" mantra. Then we cut to a cemetery and both of her parents are dead. She then breaks the fourth wall in the most obnoxious way, claiming the comic will be more fun, but she has exposition to get out of the way first. She says, I shit you not, she says, you watched 22 Marvel movies, you can give me at least 5 pages. What's that called? Hanging a lampshade on it. Like, Khaleesi knows how bad the reaction to this book has been from announcement to release. She knows she needs to engage in some damage control. I know this book drags at the start, guys. I even mentioned it. If I mention it, you can't criticize me for it later on. It's like when kids at school, they would call themselves dumb or stupid before a test or a task or some sort of activity. Before they could fail and before others could make fun of them for failing, they did it to themselves first. It's a self-deprecating race to the bottom of the barrel. But with SJWs and wokies, we are supposed to applaud their foibles and faults. Nuh-uh, Khaleesi, your book drags us way too long, and telling me it's dragging us while it's dragging us doesn't make this shit any more palatable. There is, I think, a joke about fracking in there somewhere. Is Jersey prone to earthquakes? I don't know. This book is a mess. Maya goes home to an empty house and engages in a cleaning frenzy for lack of anything better to do. There are a few small bits that work in here. The idea that by engaging in a task like this, one can hide from how not there her parents are. That works. The idea that the world insists a woman should clean or should deal with grief by cleaning, as Maya suggests, however, does not. I think Maya tries to OD here and fails. She tips skull and crossbone pills into her hands and faints in the next panel, but we never see her actually taking the pills. Then she wakes up in the morning talking about Trotsky. Because when I face existential crises and immense loss and grief and mourning, naturally it's socialists that I think of. And the rays of sunshine breaking through the window and warming her face suggest a break through the grief, and if it happened at all, but I can't be sure because this book is so clumsy and such a mess, a break from suicidal feelings. We jump forward 13 years to the present, to this scene. I'm just going to leave that one out there. We get some next door neighbour domestic bliss. Does anybody actually have a neighbour who just drops by like this first thing in the morning? It's such a sitcom thing. He also drops by to low-key flirt by explicitly not flirting with Maya. I'm so damn glad I'm married and don't have to date these days. It must be an absolute shit show. Benny, the neighbour, is actually there to drive the kid to school because Maya is a working mum and part-time sex worker, don't forget. What is that? Is she a cam girl? Does she hook? She gives Jennifer Lopez-style rub-downs? She's a stripper? I don't even know if we'll find out. Why does a Hollywood celebrity, famous worldwide, feel the need to validate sex work? Is it a gender-pushing pandering? Hey guys, I'm on your side, buy my book? Or is she low-key implying all actors are whores? The radio tries to continue to convince us that the world is a mess because of the ozone layer, which is healing, right? I read that it's been healing for quite a while. So between now and 20 years in the future, somehow it gets worse again. They also take a shot at Elon Musk because that's topical. It reminds me of that scene in iRobot where Will Smith buys vintage Jordans from the year the film was released. Toast popping from the toaster scares Maya so much that she turns partially invisible, and we see the kid cover for her by distracting Latino Kramer. That's a good way to show the kid knows about her superpowers without being explicit about it. Benny is unlucky in love, and the kid tells him to nut up and ask his mum out. Ah, the precocious child pimp. Classic storytelling. I mean, his mum is a sex worker, part-time, and she's off to work dressed like this, so I'm thinking hooker or cam girl. We get another flashback as Maya heads to work on the subway. In an age where gingers are being erased from existence, but you can get cancelled for digital blackface for using a Charlie Murphy meme. In an age where Carl from The Simpsons had to be suddenly, retroactively after 30 years, voiced by a black guy. Is there not a disconnect when a Hollywood millionaire writes about a struggling single mum living in a ratty apartment and taking the subway to work? Maybe she did some of this stuff before the fame hit, but it seems disingenuous. In this flashback, we see Maya undergoing some changes. This is my favourite of them all. So the way it's portrayed in the next 4 pages, it doesn't nail down either what Maya's powers are specifically. We've got some Kamala Khan action happening here, but there's more to it. Nor does it tell us how she got the powers. Was she exposed to some sort of chemicals while cleaning a parent's lab, or in the years she helped her father with his experiments as a developing child? Was it the pills that I'm still not sure she even took in what was maybe a suicide attempt, but it was so poorly written it leaves something that important unclear to the reader? I don't know, because it's also unclear. What is hinted at through the narration and the manifestation of the power is Maya's abilities are inherently linked to the very essence of being a woman. I bet the trans mob will call this book turfish, but it's so up its own arse about the highs and lows of being a biological woman. Her powers and her exaggeration of the female physique. That's where the Reed Richards armpit hair comes from, along with the strange growths and the ability to change shape. When she's happy, she melts. When she's hurt, she heals. When she's put in life-threatening danger, she generates an energy force field that is powerful enough to root her to the spot and derail a train. An unmanned train, because otherwise she'd potentially be up for manslaughter. I bet that was an editor's addition. Her boobs grow drastically and temporarily. She calls it a second puberty. There's gunk, fluids, and all the gross messy stuff that I guess everybody has, but for women, the author is saying, they aren't allowed to admit this stuff happens, that this stuff exists. That's somehow oppressive. Like the straw man earlier in the book, who said women should control and handle this stuff so the rest of the world, men specifically was the implication, shouldn't have to deal with it. Which, swings both ways. We could, both sexes, shield one another from the grossest elements of being a man or a woman. I'll go buy pads or tampons for you if I'm at the store, that doesn't bother me. But I won't demand you pick up my jizz socks if you don't make me look at the aftermath of your period. Why does this book exist? Who of us married men haven't dealt with all of that gross stuff, everything in this book? Is this book for incels? Do you think there are guys out there who don't know this stuff exists? If so, let them learn about it the same way we all did, with girlfriends and sisters and partners and work colleagues and wives. Did the world need period blood Kamala Khan? No, the world doesn't even need Kamala Khan as it is. Once you go Super Saiyan and the hillbilly rapists disperse, so Hunks-a-Lot schmoozes in and they ride a bike together. If Freud said that dreams about flying were actually about sex, then surely he would have equated riding a bike to the same effect. Or maybe not. I assume this is the father of her child, but the kid looks Latino, and Harvey here looks like Harvey from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I wonder if that's subconscious when authors do that. Khaleesi can't even be as old as me. Surely she grew up watching Melissa Joan Hart like the rest of us. As she funnels into work like a seditious little worker bee drone, Maya finally reveals the source of her part-time sex work. She does foot stuff. This feels like a softball from Khaleesi. Oh, she sells pics of her feet. That's all. She's not out doing Bucks Party gangbangs. She's still good. She's still pure and innocent. It's like she wants the cred and unity of being pro-sex work, but doesn't want the real-life stigma for her character that comes with the same. It's still not something to be looked up to, though. It's not a role model or tribute. Nobody would think Daredevil's a better character if he started being a rent boy on a street corner. Khaleesi is doing that hello fellow kids bit, and the everyone can be a hero bit, but not everybody can be a hero. Not like this, because superpowers don't exist. If you're going to do the everyone can be a hero bit, it needs to be grounded, it needs to be realistic, it needs to be by contributing positively in some small way to somebody's life, you can make a big difference, and that's a heroic act. So Maya works for a meat company run by her dad's old friend, the same one we saw at the funeral. The funny thing about this is Khaleesi doesn't seem to be pushing the blue checkmark NPC narrative with this spit. She admits the company's goal is to create meat with as little meat in it as possible. That's the end game for the whole not a burger, meatless meat, eat the bugs crowd. The media right now is tripping over themselves to push this new industry of 3D printed meat products created from plant sources. Khaleesi actually pulls a small dub here. She's riding the fence a bit, which you probably should do when you're writing a story. She's not saying the meat alternative industry is good or bad. She mentioned before about cattle doing irreparable damage to the nation, but here she pokes fun at the not meat sector by jokingly listing outrageous ingredients allowed in the meat instead of actual meat. Cardboard, chemical waste, and human bodies, a la Soylent Green among them. She then cynically says the initiative is billed as a green one, but the only green involved is the green of the money these alternative industries generate. If she were going to go full NPC, she'd just say the not meat industry is better than Jesus and saved all of mankind. Her workplace already has a hugely contrived, unrealistic, and story-destroying downside as it is, so she didn't need to poke fun at the whole not meat industry we're living in right now. So good on you, Khaleesi, for presenting a point of view and letting readers decide how they feel about it instead of telling them what to think. It's maybe one of 3 or 4 small things you did right. The ridiculous element of her workplace, the one that just shoves a story into a blender, hits the puree button and walks out the door, is the rampant sexism depicted in the workplace. It's overwhelming, it's omnipresent, it's wholly unrealistic. This is a misandrist's wet dream. Every man is a leering, oversexed, groping, harassing, 2 steps from being a rapist monster. If even a tenth of the harassment shown here existed today, these guys would lose their jobs so fast even Barry Allen couldn't be able to sign their pink slips. If a guy acted like these guys do, they would be cancelled so fast. Men are so overly demonised these days, no one would be stupid enough to risk their careers by saying or doing half of this stuff. The author needs these guys to be awful lectures to justify the way her character behaves. This is a refrain we saw in the JSA animated movie that I reviewed a while ago. Incompetent writers need incompetent characters or they can't do their job. An incompetent writer can't write a competent character. If they could, they themselves would actually be competent. Incompetent writers need incompetent characters because it's all they know how to write, because it's all they are. And if they have to deal with competent characters who are capable, who have agency, and who influence real change on the imaginary world they are playing in, these writers have no experience or skill in that realm, and they have nothing to draw upon to fuel their writing. Khaleesi needs these guys to be walking rape machines, or her character would have less hardships, less struggles, and her message wouldn't be heard. It's hard to write all men bad when all men aren't actually bad, so Khaleesi has written a comic about all men being bad, except Hispanic Kramer and her kid. Man, I hope Hispanic Kramer turns out to be a creep. That'd complete the theme, wouldn't it? We meet Khaleesi's boss, a BIPOC handicapped woman. I kid you not, she literally went with, oh, she's gay too. She's married to a woman. She's in a wheelchair and she's a person of colour. That's the trifecta right there. She's gay, she's handicapped, and she's a person of colour. She tells Maya to go finish her current project, and then Maya can go and find a cure for white feminism. While Maya calls out, yes boss, and runs off with a snack in her mouth, fed like a dog. She even says without her boss feeding her at work, she'd starve. She says it only half jokingly. Khaleesi lets her character be a literal pet dog for this stunning and brave LGBTQIA plus POC differently abled queen, and yes, that's a queen with a KW. Now all my fellow mayo monkeys and vanilla gorillas, all my fellow whitoids, how would you react if your POC friend/boss told you to go and find a cure for some aspect of your own whiteness? We know reverse racism isn't a thing because this is the same kind of passive racism they've been complaining about for so long. Racism is racism, my guys. Maya runs along like a good little dog and explains a little about how when her hormones get up, either from fear or exertion or anger, her powers lash out and she can't control them. There's a clumsy little montage of her powers acting up, but it's poorly conceptualized and it's hard to tell what's actually happening. Maya's got a little Fitbit type watch that lets her know when she's getting too close to losing it. She's got it timed that her outbursts happen when she clocks off work and arrives home for the day, but the additional stress of being called into the boss's office sends her levels through the roof. She calls them her crazy girl hormones, but that kind of pushes away from the overarching narrative of the book. It's all about the essence of being a woman, the good and the bad, although aside from being a mother, the bad is almost completely the sole focus of this book. It's look how hard it is to be a woman, you awful man. You don't know how hard it is to be us, plus we have to put up with you sexist pervs hitting on us all the time. I can't even right now. Whenever Maya is criticised by men, they call her crazy, bitchy, bossy, stuck up, disgusting, irresponsible. The flip side of everything, I suppose Khaleesi thinks men must think about women, because they are all sexist morons who objectify all women all the time, except Latino Kramer. He's just a dreamy and sensitive and oh so perfectly in the friend zone. She even does that you'll make a great boyfriend to somebody someday thing. Hopefully he shoots his shot and she just shuts him down hard. It'd be some High School Musical BS if Maya suddenly realised Benny exists and has a penis and that he wants to put it inside her. Oh, Benny, you're an actual man who wants to fuck? I thought you were just a genderless pack mule that I could shift parental responsibilities onto while I was off taking foot pics for other awful men who pay for them and supplement my income. Let's have a quick look at some of the stupid shit that Khaleesi thinks will be said by men in the workplace 20 years in the future, after Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and Mattress Girl and Rose McGowan and all of this shit. Check it out, baby. I run the whole alphabet. Look, I know you're married to a chick, but maybe you just haven't found the right man yet. You could have just laughed like the other girls. You didn't need to be such a bitch about it. Very believable, very true to life. Khaleesi has such an ear for dialogue, stunning and brave. Maya, who is looking more and more like Khaleesi as the story goes on, even those gnarly eyebrows, then goes on a self-flagellating rant about how by focusing on her own problems, she is part of the problem. It's gross and it's soulless and spineless, and even her boss recognises it and gives her a token ally gold star and a cookie. I mean, is Khaleesi poking fun at the people who cut their own throats in the name of being a good ally? The self-hating whites who idolise POCs and loathe their own DNA? It kind of seems like she is, but she's doing it through her own protagonist and arguably her own self-insert. So what is she saying? As a blue checkmark Hollywood lefty, she feels all of these self-loathing notions, but part of her recognises its performative guilt blackface to fit in? That none of it solves any problems? I don't know if she's smart enough to even do that. She's certainly not a good enough writer to make it clear to the audience. At a meeting with her boss, she's given a stern talking to about her attitude. And the dude sounds like a dinosaur even if this was set in the 1950s. What research company working in the not meat industry would set heels as company policy for women? Can you imagine anyone ever telling a female employee to be a good girl and look him in the eye when he is talking to her? That's some rapey shit right there. That's the sort of thing I imagine a fella pays for. He then reminds her blazers aren't part of the dress code because morale is improved when people can tell what cup size she has. Does she think this happens these days? Does she think all men think and feel this way, or would if they could? Does she think women are somehow losing rights and in 20 years' time they will be significantly worse off than they were? None of this works as commentary because it's not true to life. Not frequently and not commonly anyway. There might be some boorish outliers, but this isn't real enough to resonate with people. This is a hyper-realised version of what Khaleesi thinks the world is like. She needed the men to be the worst people on the planet to make her reprehensible protagonist look like a good guy, and it still doesn't work. Later that day, Billy's at a playdate when a distress call comes through the local ham radio, and coincidentally, it's a woman being attacked by a man in an apartment. Of course, it's a woman being attacked by a man, because domestic violence only happens the one way. This woman lives in an apartment across the road from where Billy is. Maya and Benny drive there, and Maya heads upstairs to try and save the woman. That's pretty selfless, powers or not. She stops fighting her raging emotions and lets them take over to manifest as abilities. More and more I'm convinced Maya's powers are whatever she needs them to be whenever she needs them to be. When she needs supersonic hearing, she has it. When she's getting hit by a train, she creates a force field. To sneak up on an ex-boyfriend here to kill a woman, she can turn invisible. Now, the distress call said the guy had a gun, but he's just chilling here eating an apple. I mean, you can't even be sure he's committed a crime. This could be some kind of weird swatting attempt on him. This guy might have just got home from the office and is having a healthy piece of fruit before he gets changed and sits down to play some Xbox. Somehow he hears Maya and takes a swipe at her with his knife. I mean, it's still not a crime. She could potentially be in his place, an intruder, superpowered or not. And who hears creaky footsteps, sees nothing and decides to take a wild swing at the air with a knife? There's no evidence that superpowers exist in this world, aside from Maya, so there's no reason for this guy to suspect an invisible person is creeping on him. It's just some weird writing. She kicks him in the head so he knows someone is there, and then to seal the deal that she's busted. Yeah, couldn't do a whole comic about being a gross chick without throwing at least one of those in there. I'm surprised it took this long, honestly. She then starts monologuing to us, talking about the voice that all women have in their head telling them they aren't good enough, to paraphrase. Well, sweetheart, everyone has doubts. Everyone has times where they feel like their best isn't enough, times when they worry. Everyone has a voice in their head telling them they're not enough. That's not a thing just because you have a vagina. That's not a woman-exclusive thing. Get down off your cross, stop being a martyr, and write a decent book. How about that? Maya goes Super Saiyan, and we are graced with the worst dialogue of the whole book, which is really saying something. She taunts the guy who turns out to be a hitman rather than a disgruntled ex. Hey, I'm just glad he's not white. She asks him in a baby voice if he needs a little time out. That was hard to read and even harder to say. He says, "You're not my mother, you mad." I suppose he was going to say one of those 7 words you can't say on television next. She interrupts. She says, "Yeah, I'm mad. I'm your mum now, and I'm mad." What? That's even dumber reading it for the second time. The sound of a dying girl distracts Maya and she pins the hitman to the wall with some knives. but he escapes while she's looking for the other woman. She finds her, the girl dies. We get a fairly lengthy bit about mortality and what we leave behind when we die and how little of that probably matters to most people. It's okay, it's a decent callback to similar thoughts she had when her parents died. I reckon this is another incident of a ghostwriter or the editor stepping in and suggesting that a thematic link is possible and should be explored. It's the kind of thing I do when I'm editing scripts for someone. I see related elements in a story and suggest that the connection to them could be stronger or made more explicit. It makes for more sophisticated writing. Pixar is really good at this, even if it's ham-fisted at times. It's always really clear to the viewer what's happening. There's a double-page spread of Maya chasing the hitman down and using her various powers, super speed, stretching, enhanced senses to defeat him, in between flashbacks of her childhood, her current life, and other traumas. The hitman says you can have the girls, reinforcing the human trafficking idea that the dying girl mentioned earlier. A strange blue tattoo on his arm ignites and burns him alive, stopping him from talking. All that's left is a tiny camera. Maya picks it up, and this is the one great victory of this whole book, the very best part. She looks into the camera and says, "Are you the one I've been talking to this whole time?" I really liked that, and I thought it explained the way she's been breaking the fourth wall the whole time, not talking to us, but talking instead to this mysterious shadowy figure. But then I realised in the next moment that it makes no sense at all unless there were cameras everywhere, and she knew where they were there, and why talk to a threatening presence so flippantly and personally? The one thing I thought was cool about this book literally doesn't make sense and can't make sense. The antagonist is, of course, a blonde white woman, classic SJWism. Aside from Scandinavia, you're unlikely to find more blonde people than you are in England and France, two of the most widespread and successful colonial powers, so all colonisers are blondes, so all blondes are evil. Absolutely mental stuff that goes through these people's heads. Then we get a succinct patina of Khaleesi's thesis. Maya says, "My body has always felt like a curse, like all the reasons we, that is women, are hated manifest. My life would have been so much easier if I were normal." The implication being that women aren't normal, that their grossness and weird hormonal swings and bitchiness and bossiness and attitudes are part of what makes them cursed and different, but also these things are superpowers in themselves, and the very things we awful men think are shortcomings are in fact things to be accepted and used to empower women everywhere. It's heavy-handed and self-aggrandizing. It might bolster some less well-read women, but as a bloke, this stuff's all pretty cringe. But not as cringe as this outfit. She warns all evildoers, but kind of the blonde woman on the camera, and kind of us too, because Khaleesi didn't think this concept through at all, that Mom, the mother of madness, is coming for them. Mother of madness, mother of dragons, that's pretty derivative. And that's the end of this issue. Next issue's out in August. For some reason, it's not a monthly book. Anyway, that was terrible. Khaleesi is one of those self-important letters to the reader at the end of the book, explaining, justifying, and damage controlling what you just paid $5 to read. I didn't pay anything, if you catch my drift, yo-ho. The letter is even worse than the comic because it doesn't have the, frankly, pretty decent art to act as a barrier between Khaleesi's mental diarrhea and your eyes. She hits all the talking points that she's supposed to. Too scared to follow her brothers into a comic book store as a kid. That sounds like a you problem. While she's at various cons and events after Game of Thrones became popular, she saw comics for the wonderful medium they are, but alas, she noticed the male-to-female ratio was off, in her words. I would suggest the male-to-female ratio for books has become much more weighted for the female than it has ever been before, to the point where it no longer represents the actual demographics of comics. Women are overrepresented. Books for women are overrepresented. Ladies, I don't think you have anything to complain about when it comes to representation and having books made just for you. Not anymore. She tries to backpedal her man-hate by citing two men in her life that aren't oppressive, walking rape factories, but they just happen to be related to her, so it barely counts. She tells us that toxic masculinity is real, it affects everyone, that this book is here to educate, particularly young men, on the problem and help them be better. Good thing she added this letter at the end, or she might have come across like a smug cunt. I'll raise my sons free of your toxicity, Khaleesi. You sort out your own kids. Hollywood parenting is working so well for Liv Schreiber's kids. She finishes with empty platitudes about seeing your beauty and your light, and signs off with Emilia X. That seems loaded. She's pissing off the trans community, now she's going to piss off the black community. There's some concept stuff at the back. It's very contrived. I doubt any of it happened organically. It's absolutely replete with satanic New World Order symbolism. If you've been down the rabbit hole, if you know your way around Crazy Days of Nights, the Left Eye Club and all that Masonic cult bullshit that permeates Hollywood, you'll recognise in shocking explicitness dozens of clear references to all that evil monstrous stuff that goes on that nobody wants to talk about, because their lives won't be complete if they don't watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3, even after they learn what some of Batista's tattoos actually represent. There's also an explanation of Maya's powers because the story didn't do a very good job of explaining it in the 38 pages Khaleesi was allowed for this issue. Keanu's Berserker is how you do these celebrity comics right. Not that it was good or bad, I didn't read it, but it's his involvement in concept handled by industry pros. He's the character. You're buying a Keanu Reeves comic, and for some people that's cool. Others have deep dived into his life and past and realised that no one reaches these heights of fame and success without some pretty hefty compromises. Look it up if you can be bothered. This comic is Emilia Clarke's mind fever, self-loathing, feminist ravings rendered in an above-average art style and a veneer of capitalism bad, as she charges money for and gets paid for writing this comic. Decorated with symbols and iconography of probably the most evil people alive on the planet today, this is a nonsensical attempt at brainwashing, trying to convince women that the parts of themselves that they struggle with are the parts that they need to accept. The alternative is to rise above your shortcomings, or at least try. Self-improvement, self-elevation. Self-love has its place, but the participation award generation indulges in a little too much of it. Be harsh, push yourself, demand better of yourself, or wallow in mediocrity and obscurity, just like this comic would if it were not for the outrage generated by the clickbait reporting on the title and Clarke's vaunted star power. But honestly, who of us wouldn't be famous if we got faux fucked by Aquaman on screen? I'll probably review the next issue as well, because it only costs me time and brain cells, and I have plenty of both. Let me know what you thought of this comic. Let me know if you agree or if I'm off base, if I'm a misogynistic patriarchal dinosaur who can't see stunning and brave when it's right on the screen in front of me. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.